Hi everybody. It's time for you to become more independent of my help. Debugging is an important skill that all programmers need, and it's hard, but it is a skill and you can get better at it, and I'm going to tell you 3 tricks right now. In our program, you've made a TRex object that has a bunch of separate methods for different behaviors it's supposed to have. Start, jump, apply gravity, is off ground. When something doesn't work, there are 3 important things that you need to do to figure out where the problem is. First, test each method separately. Second, use print statements to look inside your variables to see if they make sense. And third, you need to think logically, step by step, about what the program does when it runs and how the different parts of your program are connected together. So I'm going to show you how those 3 ideas will come together to do some debugging of this program that has several very serious bugs. So let's get into it. When I run the program, here's my TRex, it displays, and I press the space bar and nothing happens, which upsets me because here I have a key released method and I think it's supposed to make my TRex jump. And then if it jumps, I'm supposed to apply gravity and fall downwards. So why is it that nothing is working? So let's start with principle 1. Let's test each method separately. So let's start with just the jumping method. I'm going to comment everything else out so that I'm sure that these methods aren't affecting what I'm seeing on the screen. I just want to see if my TRex starts the jump. So let's run it and see if that's changed anything. And the answer is no, it hasn't. Okay, so let's try principle number 2. Let's use print statements to look at the variables. So I'm curious whether start jump is working here. So let's go ahead and go inside that method. And let's print out my y coordinate. Okay, now let's run it and see what happens. So I'm pressing space, and is it displaying anything? It is. Here we are. Oops. Okay, so one important thing is you have to be able to see your program and the console at the same time. So every time I press space, it just says 200. But this has told me a very important thing. This has told me that at least I know that this line of code is actually running. Because if I didn't see anything, it was very possible that maybe start jump wasn't actually running at all. Because if it weren't running, but it actually worked, I still wouldn't actually see anything. So we're narrowing down the problem. I know that this method is running, but what's weird is I expect my y-coordinate should be changing because here it looks like I'm changing it, but I don't see anything happening. Let's just be sure by printing out the coordinate on both sides. So I want to see what does it look like before and what does it look like after. And the answer is, oops. And the answer is, it still looks like it's just 200s. It might be a little bit hard to tell which is before and which is after, so a good idea is sometimes including some text there so that you can see what the before and after is. Okay. And so still, before and after is 200. So now we have to proceed to step 3, which is think logically about what's happening. So I know before my y-coordinate is 200, after it's 200, I think it should be changing because I'm subtracting my y speed. But what is my y speed? Maybe I want to display that also. So let's do system.out.println y speed, and then y speed. Okay, I'm pressing space, and it looks like my y speed is 0, and that makes sense because if I was subtracting 0, I wouldn't expect the y coordinate to change. Okay, we've narrowed down the problem. I think a lot of people would immediately just say, oh, well, let's set my y speed to 10 up here. But it's really important that you do step 3, which is think about how the parts of your program are connected together. It doesn't make sense to start your TRex with a y speed of 10, because that would make it fly into the air. Instead, think about what is the purpose of start jump. The purpose of start jump is actually to give me an upward speed. That's why it's taking an input here. So I think that it's just that I've forgotten to set my y speed to some positive value. So let's do that. And now I'll keep this print statement in here so I can see what it does. Here, let's move my console here so I can see it better. Okay, so I'm going to run the program. Great. So now I see that each time I press space, he's going up a little bit. All right, well, clearly there's still a lot that's not working. So this apply gravity business isn't working. So let's go back to step 1, which was testing each method separately. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out this stuff that starts the TRex jump. And I'm going to just run this one line of code that's supposed to make my TRex fall with gravity. And let's see if that works. And of course it doesn't work. So I'm expecting to see my TRex falling, and I don't see him moving at all. So let's take a look inside apply gravity and see what's going on here. Okay, well, what I noticed is here I'm changing my Y speed, but there's no code that's actually running that moves my TRex. Nothing changes the Y coordinate. So I think in addition to adding gravity, I also probably need to do this. Okay, so now I'm applying gravity to my speed, and I'm using my speed to change my coordinates. So let's see if apply gravity works. And I see myself getting sucked up into the sky. So what's probably happening? Probably I have a sign error. My gravity is in the wrong direction. So let's change that to be negative. Okay, great. That's what I'm expecting to see. So now let's start trying to put these things together. Let's see if I can have my TRex stop when he hits the ground, for example. So I uncommented the if statement. We'll run the if statement again. Great, so he's not falling through the ground. So let's try now and add in the jump again. And we'll see if the jump works. Interesting. So it seems like once he gets kind of up here enough, then the jumping works, but for a while he was just kind of moving up in incremental steps. So I wonder what's going on there. I want to think logically about what I'm seeing and what might explain it. So in this beginning section, it looks like when I press space, I'm starting the jump correctly, but gravity isn't running, and I think maybe gravity should be running. So if gravity isn't running, that leads me to suspect that maybe is off ground is the problem. A good way to test this is, like, let's test things separately. So I'm going to turn off this part, and now I've got, like, Flappy Bird TRex. So I see that the falling and the jumping happen together, and the problem really is about whether or not I'm on the ground. So again, notice the thinking that I'm applying here. I'm testing my methods separately. I'm testing them in small combinations to try and narrow down where the problem is. So let's look inside is off ground. Here it is. I'm saying if y plus get height, and get height looks like it's the height of my image. So I'm saying if that's bigger than 200. So let's think about what all of this means. So y is my y coordinate, and I know the y coordinate of my image is the upper left. Get height should be the height of my image. So that means y plus get height should be my upper left plus the height, which should be like the place where my feet are. And so I'm asking, is the place where my feet are bigger than 200? Well, where's 200? I see that my line here, I'm drawing my line at a y-coordinate of 200. Oh, I see what's happening. So in my is off ground, I'm asking, are my feet bigger than 200? And the answer is no. No, the answer is yes, because bigger than is below. So what do I really want to know here? That's a good question to ask yourself when you're debugging. It's so easy to get lost in the details. Think, what do I really want to know? I want to know why is it not applying gravity after I jump. So let's think about it with some numbers. So I press space. I still have this print statement here, which is good. So it says 190 is my y-coordinate. And that's the y-coordinate of my head. And I'm then adding my height. So it seems like if I add my height to 190, I'm still probably bigger than 200, which means that is off ground is going to return false because I'm not off the ground. But because I've gone up a little bit, I think I should be off the ground because I've jumped. So I think what's happening is it must just be that I have the wrong number for the ground here. I'm using 200 for the ground, but I should have the ground be like wherever my feet are when I start. So let's try and figure out where are my feet when I start. I guess a good thing to do might be up in the TRex constructor. That's where I start. Let's print out y plus get height. Because y plus get height is what I'm using as the thing I'm testing for. And if I print that out right after I start, that'll tell me where it is. So 292 is what it says. All right, great. So let's delete that, and let's go back here and say 292. You know, this is a bit of a magic number. Let's delete this, and let's say starting ground level, because this phrase helps me understand what's going on better. I won't ask like why 292. That's a weird number. So up here I'll say private int starting ground level and then 292. Okay, cool. So let's run it again. All right. Interesting. So now we have a new problem, and this is normal in programming. You solve problems, and then there are more problems. So it seems like I was jumping, but did you see how like I sometimes like bury myself in the ground? Well, yeah, there we go. Buried in the ground. So if I'm buried in the ground, I think what's happening is I'm falling past the point where the ground is. So I think if that happens, I just want to reset my position to be on the ground. So here I'm saying if I'm off the ground, we'll apply gravity. Otherwise, let's set to ground level. And this doesn't exist yet, but it seems like something that we want to do, so let's create it. So I'll hover over, and I'll say create the method, and here it is. And I'll just set my y coordinate to be starting ground level. Except I guess I need to subtract the height, because my y coordinate is like what I really want is I want y plus get height to be the starting ground level, but I need to save into my y variable. So it's like I did algebra and subtracted get height from both sides. Okay. Cool. So I think that seems like it's working. So debugging is problem solving, and it requires thinking, and it's hard. But it's probably better to do that than to wait for me to come to you for 15 minutes. So remember the 3 principles. Test each method separately. Use print statements to look at your variables. And then you have to think logically about what's happening. What might explain what you're seeing. Just staring at your code isn't a good solution. Randomly trying things is not a good solution. You could spend a whole hour randomly trying stuff that wouldn't work. The only way out of your problems is thinking. So, good luck. I hope this helps.